Hi, everyone, and welcome to another A and B Horror Movies video. I'm Aaron,
I'm Ben.
and today we are very excited to be joined by John Harrison. John, welcome.
How are you guys? Glad
Coming
to be
home.
here.
We are
It's
doing
my
great. Rainy day, but we're doing well. Thank you for talking with us. This is amazing. So let's see. You are a writer, a director, a composer, a producer. You wear many hats. I probably left a few things off your resume there.
Well, I get bored easily, so what can I say?
Yeah, you keep yourself busy, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. You were the composer and first assistant director for Day of the Dead and the first Creepshow movie. You worked closely with George Romero, which is very impressive. So we'll have to ask you a few questions about that. You also directed Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, one of my favorites. I've got a copy right here, in fact. One of
Yeah,
my
the new
favorites.
4K edition is coming out, I think, in the next month.
Oh,
I
cool.
heard. I'll definitely get a copy. Perfect rewatch for the fall season, I would say. Let's see. You wrote and directed the Dune miniseries. You also wrote and directed Clive Barker's Book of Blood, which I have a few questions for you about that as well. And you've done numerous episodes of Ben's got it right there. Numerous episodes of Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Crypt, Monsters, and Creepshow. Very impressive resume. We can't wait to talk with you about all of your projects. But before we get to that, we are very excited to talk about your new book, which is Passing Through Veils.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm
A
glad you have a
novel
copy
of
of it.
dread. Yes, I got a copy and took it with me to Cancun this past summer.
Oh, fantastic.
Let's
Hope
see.
it didn't ruin your vacation.
No, I loved it. There might be chapters I don't remember per se, sitting by the pool. No, I'm just kidding. No, I loved it. It was great. A novel of dread. That's a great way to describe it. And the cover is quite awesome as well.
Yeah,
Reminds
well,
me
I
of,
have
like,
to,
Nightmare on Elm
yeah,
Street.
I have to give credit to the publishers on that because they came up both with the tagline there, Novel of Dread, and the cover idea. Wordfire Press has been really a great partner in this whole process here. And for those of you who are interested in reading the book, you can get it at Wordfire. That's all one word, wordfire.press. I'm sorry, wordfirepress.com. You can also get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. But Kevin Anderson is the guy that runs Wordfire Press. And Kevin is a New York Times bestselling author in his own right. He and Brian Herbert have teamed up for all the additional Dune books. Kevin has his own series of books, number of Star Wars novels that he's written. And this is his publishing company. And he's just been a great guy to work with. And so I'm honored and thrilled to be on his imprint.
Yeah, congratulations. Like you said, you can get it on Amazon. I saw that I have the paperback. There's also hardcover, and you can get it on Kindle. Highly recommended. Let's see. I wrote down that it's an intense murder and haunting mystery. Readers experience what the protagonist does sort of as the story unfolds. I guess my first question for you would be, what inspired you to write this book? And then Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, it was an idea that just kind of percolated for quite a while. And with the other books that I've written, the ideas kind of simmer around in there in the old brain pan for a while before I ever decide what to do with them. And at one point I thought maybe this could be a good movie, but as I started writing it down to kind of get the story down, I realized I'm really writing it as a novel. I felt like the novel format gave me the opportunity to really dive into the character. This is a very deep psychological thriller. What's going on in her life is definitely informed by her own psychological trauma, things that have happened to her. Yes, she discovers the mystery. She finds the hidden closet in her house that she's just bought, which has clues to the murder of the woman who used to own it, and that sets her on this obsessive path to find out what happened. But it's really a psychological study because at some point, and maybe you experienced this, Aaron, that you're never really sure whether what's going on is truly happening or whether it's just in her mind. And so she becomes a bit of an unreliable narrator. I won't say too much more than that because there's a big twist at the end. But I'm very proud of it. I had a great time writing it, and although I'm fond of saying this is what happens when there's a pandemic and a guy has too much time on his hands.
You can't go outside, right?
No, man. So I just sit here and type away.
Yes, yes.
So there's a lot of like little twists and turns in this
Mhm.
as the story unfolds. I'm wondering, because obviously you wrote for films and stuff as well. Where do you start with the writing? Because when we talk to a lot of directors and stuff, I always ask, do you get so far in the story and the script and then go, oh, this would be a good idea. Now I want to put that in. So does it sort of come along with the writing with that as well? Or is that sort of later on?
Well, I guess every experience is different. And writing for film and writing for a novel are completely, entirely different experiences.
Okay.
Because when you're writing for a film, as I've done many times, you have to visualize what you're putting down on the page, because the script really it doesn't exist independently of anything else. If it's in success, it's going to turn into moving images. So you have to make the writing on the page feel like you're seeing a movie. Whereas with a book, you are trying to draw your reader into the interior of your characters, which you really can't do in a screenplay. You have to hope that the director and the actors are going to convey that when they're performing it. In a book, you have a lot more freedom to do that. I guess some writers like to outline the entire story and really know exactly what's going to happen all the way along. I don't necessarily do that. I like to surprise myself, and as you're writing, a lot of twists and turns occur to you that maybe you didn't think of before. I will say that I always try to know my ending.
Right.
I
Yes.
always want to know sort of where it's going to climax. I may not get there in the route that I thought, and I may not do exactly what I thought, but if I have that as a guidepost, I can march towards that, as opposed to just sort of flailing around and then suddenly, and believe me, I've done this plenty of times where I've gotten into it and then said, oh crap, I don't know how to end this thing. I don't know
Oh
where it's
gosh,
going.
yes, yes.
So I prefer to know my ending.
Yeah, yeah.
Would
Oh,
you
that's key. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, would you say it's easier to write, say, a straight out book than it is to write a screenplay then, as you can put more detail into the book? And
No, I wouldn't say it's easier. Um, in fact, it's a lot harder in some ways, because you're developing a story that in a screenplay, you're confined by what you know is going to be the limits of an audience's attention in a theater. Now, some people can make 3.5 movies if you're Martin Scorsese or David Lean or whatever. But most movies are around 2 hours. That seems to be the convenient time frame, not only for an audience's attention, but for the movie theaters that want to keep turning over audiences. And so you're writing a 2-hour story. In a novel, you could be writing a story that takes place over hundreds of years. So it's really quite a different experience. It's not easier, I think.
yeah.
Well, definitely, it's certainly in the novel format, and you can have, you're not limited to like a 3 act structure that you might be with a screenplay. There's more room to breathe, I guess. And reading it, it did sort of have a cinematic feel at times. Do you think you would
Yeah.
ever adapt it to a screenplay? Do you think it would?
Oh,
I
I'd
think
love
it
it
would.
if somebody wanted. I'd love it if somebody would
Yeah.
want to do it. Whether it's me, I don't know, but I think that's probably because my background is in cinema and theater and drama. I'm sure that describing those scenes, doing that was informed by my other career.
Yeah, of course, of course. There are some aspects of it that I think that would be really creepy and awesome on the screen, like the woman who lives next door.
Yeah.
The haunted
Her
party,
hallucinations, the haunted parties,
the hallucinations. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see that dramatized. And I will admit that when I was writing it, I was sitting there daydreaming, imagining the scene as if I were watching it. So,
and it comes across when reading it. So,
yeah,
job well done, nicely done.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty happy with it, and if you like good crazy thriller psychological horror, it's not a big gore fest, as you know now that you've read it. It's got its elements of violence in it, but
Yes.
it's more a creep fest. And one of my go-to writers when I think about horror fiction is a woman named Shirley Jackson, whom you probably are aware of.
Oh, of course, yes.
House on the Haunting of Hill House, and we
The
always
the
lived
lottery.
in this castle. The
Did she
lottery,
write
of
that?
course,
Yeah,
which
of
we
course.
all studied when we were kids.
When we were kids. I don't know. Did you read that in the UK, Ben? Did you have to read that, Shirley Jackson?
I didn't know.
You don't know.
Yeah, it's a great story, and you know, it
It's a good
started off
story,
as
yeah.
a New Yorker short story in the magazine, the New Yorker. But she's
Oh, wow.
she's just a genius, a brilliant writer of great psychological terror, and she's always been an enormous influence on me, and so I was happy to try and play in that sandbox a little bit with Passing Through Veils.
Yep, and Shirley Jackson is mentioned on the back cover.
Yep.
Before I forget, though, I wanted to point out, and Ben, then I'll let you ask. I wanted to point out that the reviews have been great so far. I did jot down a few just to read quickly. Some of these are Amazon reviews from readers. Revenge is a dish best served cold, which I thought was nice. Chills, seduction, and psychological intrigue sums it up perfectly. And Fangoria, an author from Fangoria, said the book is dark, haunting, sexy, and riveting. And I saved this one for last. Clive Barker on the back said Harrison's fiction lingers long after you turn the final page. He's a born storyteller. So congratulations.
Thank you, Clive.
Yes, that's
cool.
amazing. So I don't really have a question with that. I just wanted to show that the reviews have been awesome.
Thank you very much.
And say congratulations.
So Aaron sent me the PDF out to sort of back and forth.
Yes,
that.
you got to get a physical copy, Ben.
Yeah, I didn't quite get into it next to the pool, but
yeah.
It was like, as you were saying, you'd love to see it as if it could be turned into a movie. Is there anything you'd like to add to it, or would you take away elements of it if it was made into a movie?
Well, that's a great question, because anytime you take a piece of fiction like this, and I've had some experience doing this with Clive's work, for example, with Dune, where you have to adapt a story from one medium into a next. There's always, in most cases, if it's going from novel to film or television, it's a process of subtraction rather than addition, because you have to find a way to condense what can be told in hundreds of pages into a 2-hour movie or a television series. And that's a difficult task, and I've done it several times. So in this case, I think probably there would be some streamlining that would have to occur. I can't tell you right now what that would be, because I haven't, and your audience probably wouldn't understand it anyway, because they're not familiar with the book. So if I said, well, I would cut this scene out, they'd go, oh, well, okay. Yeah, I think there would be some condensation. Or, that's not the right word, is it? I'm a writer, I should know better.
Streamline, maybe.
Yeah, they should. Condensing of the story would definitely occur, as opposed to me adding anything.
Yeah. And I would also like to know if you got an idea who you'd like to play these characters. If it was,
that's always fun.
No, that's too loaded a question. I don't want to curse it.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
There are some wonderful actresses out there that could basically knock this out of the park.
Yeah.
I think so.
I
too.
think we'd want to find somebody that is that has a certain vulnerability, but also some very wonderful energy and
Definitely, yeah.
excuse
Kind of
my
a-
language, sort of fuck you attitude,
Yeah, like
which
an
is what got her
edginess.
in what
Yeah.
an edginess, which was what got her into trouble in the first place. And she never really quite loses that, but that obsessiveness that drives her through this story, I think would be a wonderful characteristic to play with for an actress. I can think of
Awesome.
a number of them that would really go to town on this.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, Passing Through Veils, John Harrison. Check it out, and if you guys get a copy and read it, let us know. We'd like to
Yeah.
hear your
Comment.
thoughts, and we will let John know too if it's positive, which I'm sure it will be. I'm joking a little bit. So
Yeah, well, I'm gonna keep going. I've got another one coming out probably in 24, and not a follow-up. There's not a sequel, but
oh, another book. Awesome.
yeah.
What's it called? Can you tell us that?
I can only tell you that it's in the world of Residue, which is a novel that or a world that I've created, which is again another sort of thriller world with a
Very
horror
cool.
element to it. We did an adaptation of what I call the prequel to the book. Actually shot it in
Right.
Leeds in the UK, and it was on Netflix for a while as a 3-episode miniseries called Residue. But the full novel, I'm hoping, will be out in 24. But we can talk about that next time.
Yes, we'll have you on again when that comes out. We'll talk about it
All right,
all over
right,
again.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
Let's see. I do have a question for you about shorts. So I know you've like short films. I know you've done a lot of those. In fact, I just watched your 2 newest ones on Shudder, the new Creepshow. I think one was
Oh,
called
yeah.
Smile in episode 1, and episode 6 had Baby Teeth, which I thought were
Correct.
fantastic. I guess my question is though, so what is it about doing shorts that appeals to you? Why do you like that genre?
Well, I've never thought of them as shorts. They're usually elements of an anthology. And
Okay, of
so
course,
there
yes.
is usually an umbrella theme, like Creepshow, like Tales from the Dark Side, like Tales from the Crypt, that kind of link all the stories together for some reason. It's either the emotional content of the story or the thriller content or the horror content of the story. They all seem of a piece, but they are different. And so going back to my work with George when we did Creepshow, he was very intent, even though it was a movie of comic book stories. That was what he and Steve King wanted to do, basically an homage to the old EC kind of comics, Tales from the Vault, Tales from the Crypt. Yeah, exactly. It was an anthology of 5 different stories, and each one of them was completely different from the other. So I love that kind of storytelling because you can be very direct, very concise with your storytelling. And so I've had a great time on all those series. The Tales from the Dark Side series, which then became the movie, Tales from the Crypt, the new Creepshow series. You can get in there and in a short period of time, really get right to the heart of the story. And
awesome.
And in doing more than one, like in Creepshow or in Tales from the Dark Side, you can come up with really different looks and feels for each one. Tales from the Dark Side had 3 stories, and Rob Draper, the cinematographer, and I spent a lot of time designing each one of them to be completely different from the other. And as a director, as a storyteller, that's enormous fun.
Yeah, that's great. So would you say that there's maybe less pressure in doing pieces for an anthology?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, because you've got to make all of them good.
Yeah, of course.
You really don't want to have a dud in the bunch.
Yes.
And I've been very lucky in the latest Creepshow because Greg Nicotero, who's a friend of mine and is the executive producer, has given me opportunities to do stories that I really like. He's either brought them to me or I've pitched him an idea of mine that he's let me write. And so it's a great way to when you're doing a movie, it's an enormous enterprise from start to finish, not just the 2 hours of movie that's on the screen, but the making of it, the getting of the money, the post-production, the distribution. It's an enormous enterprise. In anthologies, you can really exercise your chops in a much faster way.
Focused way. Yeah. Excellent.
I love anthologies. I love them as just a fan. I love to watch them.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, super fun.
My dog is climbing up on the couch.
I love
Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was just saying, I love the Creepshow, and the new series has just come out, brilliant. And
I have to hand it to Greg. He started off this series, whatever it was, 4 seasons ago.
Yep.
Insisting that we honor the legacy of what George and Steve created. And that means the stories, the style, the fun, and he's been true to it all along.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was just about to say, they've got exactly the same feel now as I think that they did when you first watched the first ever Creepshow, and I think it's a great homage to it. So definitely well done with that.
And he's able to pull together really great talent. I mean, Rob Draper is the cinematographer, and he's really kind of the visual glue for the whole series. And so we're lucky to have him. And he and I have done a lot of work together, and I think he's just great. And but Greg has been very terrific in terms of the stories that he's chosen, getting good writers and getting good directors to execute them.
Yeah, agreed. I just want to ask, what was it like making Clive Barker's Book of Blood? Because I watched this ages ago. It's probably one of the first Blu-rays I brought in my collection.
I only have it on DVD, but you got the Blu-ray, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool. And I found it really, really haunting, but it was told it was actually told in a Clive Barker way. It had a really good sort of Hellraiser feel, I could say, an arty sort of. Is that something that is that hard to capture, going from Hellraiser, or was it quite easy to?
Well, it's quite a bit different from Hellraiser in the sense that Hellraiser has an element of the supernatural which just invades our world and becomes very, very present. Now, you could say that the ghosts in Book of Blood are the same, but again, what I loved about it when I first read the collection, Clive's collection, was in those particular stories. I took the opening and the closing story of Book of Blood and made them into one movie. I didn't take the stories in the interior. I loved, again, the psychological aspect of what was happening. Here's a woman that comes to a house to investigate paranormal events, and you're never quite sure whether they're really happening or whether she is talking herself into the fact that they're happening. And as you know, Ben, since you've seen the movie, and Aaron, you too, that she enlists the aid of a young guy who supposedly has a connection to the other world. And then you find out there's a bit of a twist on that, which makes you question whether it's really happening or not. And then, of course, you find out that all hell's breaking loose.
Of course, yeah. It's so
but
good.
what I loved about the story, and what I loved about Clive's writing, is that he creates an environment that is totally spooky, but totally plausible.
Yeah.
All the things that are happening in that house, maybe they're just, I don't know, the pipes or the wind, or I had too much to drink and I hallucinated that thing that happened. So making the movie was a lot of fun to do it. And of course, the producers allowed me to come over to Edinburgh and shoot it in Edinburgh, which was fabulous because that city is haunted and is really gothic.
Awesome.
And I had three wonderful actors to do this movie. Sophie Ward just completely nailed it as far as I was concerned, and Jonas Armstrong. It's a slow burn. It's not an in-your-face slasher movie by any means. And I think some people were a little disappointed in that because it's more of a drama than it is a gore fest.
Some horror elements, I would say. I mean, I could see if this were to made into a film, I could see maybe a similar tone with your book.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I had a great time collaborating with Clive on it. I mean,
that was my next question.
Well, I worked with Clive on an adaptation of his Abarat novels for Disney, and really enjoyed working with him. He's such a visual stylist, and he's for those of you who don't know, he's a great painter, and as well as a novelist, and his artwork is just sensational.
Wow.
If you like that kind of surrealist, hyperbolized kind of imagery, and I do, and so we had a great time working together. And when I heard the producers were putting together, hopefully, a series of movies based on his short stories, I jumped right in, and they allowed me to do the opening and the closing and make it one film.
So, and what happened? Are we getting more, or is that it?
Well, there were three that I know in that particular. There was mine, there was Dread, and there was one before that, Midnight Meat Train. And then
yes. That's right. That's right.
They have done. There has been a television series called Clive Barker's Books of Blood. I haven't seen it. I don't know how many they did. I really don't know much about it.
Oh, I'll have to take a look. Awesome. I have another question. Is there a director that you would have liked to work with but never got the opportunity to?
Oh boy, too many.
Too many. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have sent you that.
I'll go back in history if you want.
Sure. What pops into your mind?
Oh, I would have loved to have worked with David Lean, for God's sake. I would have loved to have worked with Robert Wise. I would have loved to work with Jacques Tourneur. If you want to go back into the old Val Lewton days, that kind of horror. Too many great ones to name. I mean, so I've just got a library of books so I can read about them and think about them. And then, of course, today, there are just so many wonderful directors that are all doing such great work, and I go to school on all of them.
Awesome. Good answer. And we want to talk about Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
And working with George Romero, but we have viewer questions, so I don't want to steal their moment.
Sure.
Do you want to go right into the viewer questions, Ben, or do you have something else you want to ask?
No.
Okay, let's do that. The first one is from Frank. He is on Instagram at Cheers Up Cinema. He asked, "What are your most memorable moments on shooting Tales from the Dark Side? Being that is one of my absolute favorites."
Well, I have a lot of great memories of that film because we had so much fun doing it. I think getting the cat to come out of the hitman's stomach was quite a memory. The cat didn't like it too much, but we got to do it, and I was working with Greg Nicotero and the K&B boys, and they had a full dummy of Buster Poindexter, David Johansen, who was the star of that, and so that whole sequence was really quite a treat. And the other part of that episode, which was a lot of fun, was the relationship between David Johansen and Bill Hickey, who played Drogon, the guy in the wheelchair.
Right.
Because they were both characters, and we'd be saying, "All right, we're ready," and where are they? They'd be downstairs taking a few nips, telling war stories to each other before we could get them up to the set. And they were just, for some reason, the two of them just hit it off, and you could hear them laughing downstairs. Hickey would be telling these great old war stories of his days in the movie business, and Johansson would be talking about his time on the road with the New York Dolls, and it was just fabulous. And so there was so much fun off camera that making the movie, and as everybody knows, it's really hard to make a movie. It just made it a lot of fun. So I'd say
That's great.
those elements of Cat from Hell were really great. And then of course, working with Jamie and Ray Dawn on the Lover's Vow sequence
Yes, I
was
love
just
that one.
really special
Mhm.
because that was more of a drama until the very end when the gargoyle emerges.
Right
And the
here.
two of them, yeah, the two of them were just,
There's the cat.
yep,
Go ahead.
they were so fabulous.
Good answer. That's awesome.
And also, well, you got me started now. Working with Steve Buscemi on the Mummy story. Steve came in, and it was really too bad for everybody else who had to audition, because the minute he walked through the door and sat down and did his audition, it was like, okay, that's it, we're done. But we had all these other people that were like in line waiting to do it, but it was like my mind was made up.
Call it a
And
day.
Steve, yeah, call it a day. And Steve Buscemi was just, oh man, what a great, first of all, he's a great guy, just a total
Yes.
pro,
Very
great
talented.
guy,
Mhm.
and extremely talented. And, you know, he was just really a lot of fun to work with.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
fantastic. What a great answer. Ben, do you want to take the next one?
This is from Tim from Tomac and Cheesy Movies.
I love that.
He starts by saying, "You are a legend." And what did you like most about working with Stephen King / George Romero from your collaborations?
Well, George was my creative mentor. I mean, I was very lucky to meet him. I had been on the road as a musician for several years, and I was back in Pittsburgh putting together a film production company with my two friends, Pat Buba and Dusty Nelson. And we were making our own little films at the time, made a couple of shorts that we then called George about, because he had been getting he was getting financing to do a series of sports stocks, and we offered our services. He came over and met us, and the rest is history. And he was just a great inspiration to us, because he was doing exactly what we wanted to do. He was independent, raising his own money, making his own films without the baggage of Hollywood producers or distribution. And that was both a blessing and a curse, as everybody knows. But he, in terms of making films and learning how to make films and so forth, he was the guy. And we ended up making our own feature film with my company called Effects. And he was definitely the inspiration behind that. I was lucky enough to be asked to be his assistant director by his partner then, Richard Rubenstein, who was also my producer on Dune and Tales from the Dark Side. And Richard asked me to be George's AD, and it just was a perfect opportunity for me. It was the best film school I could have ever gone to, because I was at George's side through the making of Creepshow, Day of the Dead, Night Riders, all these films. It allowed me to do the music for him, but I just learned so much just sitting there trying to keep the machinery going while watching him creatively make this movie. And as a storyteller, Steve was just, although I wasn't close to him like I was with George, his books were enormously influential on me. I directed his first original teleplay called I was going to say Everybody Needs a Little Love, but it was not that. It was a Dark Side episode, and Sorry, Wrong Number. And Steve had written that as an original teleplay, and I directed it for Tales from the Dark Side. And
who
so
was
I've
in
always
that? I remember that one. Is that
is
that the remake? It's a remake, right? Isn't that the old?
No, it's the because the original story is Sorry, Right Number.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I mean, Sorry, Wrong Number, and
Wrong number.
And Steve says Sorry, Right Number.
Right. Oh, okay.
I got the
I'm
I got
with
the
you.
back
I'm with
back
you
and
now.
forth.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a great story about a woman who gets a call from basically the future about her husband dying, and a wonderful dramatic piece. And so both those gentlemen, George in particular, because I was with him and he was a dear friend of me, up until the end, was a dear friend of mine, and we did a lot of work together. Enormous creative influence on me.
Fantastic. Another great
Good
answer.
fellow.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got a few more. This is from Tara at Daisy Tara 92. What is your craziest memory from working on horror films? In other words, what is your favorite story to tell people from your career?
All right, I'll try and make this brief. Probably the one that creeps most people out when I tell them is when we were doing Creepshow, we had 20,000 roaches for the last segment,
Oh my gosh.
which was
Yes.
they're creeping up on you. They lived in these barrels in their own trailer out back of the set, and we would bring them on the set and dump them on the set to whenever we needed them for one of George's shots. But we were always really worried about, you can feel them and see them, and you thought maybe they were on you, and you never really knew.
Oh gosh.
But the roach wranglers, we had roach wranglers from the Natural History Museum who were supposed to be in charge of these things, and they said, we were always worried, and as the AD, I had to be in charge of this. What are we going to do when we throw these roaches down? Where are they going to go? We know what happens with roaches. You turn the light on, they scatter, right?
They run. Yeah.
They run. So how are we going to corral them? Roaches don't take direction very well.
No.
So they said, oh, don't worry. What we're going to do is we're going to put the whole set, we're going to line it with Vaseline. And when they try to go up the set and escape, which we were not allowed to do, we were not allowed to let them get out into the environment. They'll crawl up there, they'll hit the Vaseline, and they'll just fall back down because they won't be able to get out. Like, okay, sounds like a plan. So we bring a bunch on for a huge thing. We turn on the lights. Okay, let's shoot. We bring them in. We do what we call a roach dump. Cameras are in the right place. And the roaches do what they're going to do. They scatter and they start fleeing everywhere, and they start going up the walls, and they hit the Vaseline, and they keep right on going and going over and out of the set and into the rest of the studio. So however long it is, 40 years later, I know the heirs of those roaches are still roaming around Western Pennsylvania.
That's hysterical. So if you're in Western Pennsylvania and you see a roach,
especially if you see the ones we brought up from South America, because they look a little different. They're a lot bigger.
Do they fly?
That's a good question.
Some of them,
they were pretty damn fast, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. All right, Ben, why don't you go with the next one?
Yeah, this is from Hop Fiction Glass. And he started with amazing director. And will we ever see another Tales from the Dark Side, another Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Dark Side? I'd die for that.
There have been attempts to do more Tales from the Dark Side, and I've not been involved with them, so I can't tell you. That question really revolves around who owns the rights. Of course. I know that there have been people who have wanted to see more Tales from the Crypt or do more Tales from the Crypt, and it always becomes an issue of rights because that one in particular is owned by several different people, and that's like herding cats. So I can't be optimistic that there will be more Tales from the Crypt, but no one's asking me. And as far as Tales from the Dark Side goes, I think there was an attempt to do a reincarnation of that series a few years ago, but it didn't fly. So I'm not sure. What we have now is the new Creepshow TV series. So for those of you who want great anthology, check it out. Shudder, AMC. That's where you can get your Jones off.
Yes, it's so good. Okay, back to me. This is from Lido Velasco at Lido Velasco 23, a good friend of our show. He says, "I love Nightmare Cafe. What was it like to? What was it like? Right? What was it like to work with Wes Craven, Robert Englund, and J. Peter Robinson, who had yet to collaborate on Wes Craven's New Nightmare?"
Well, it was fabulous. I knew Wes back in the day. He just was such a wonderful, really brilliant man. And he had a great success in the horror world, but he also, his tastes were so eclectic and so broad, and he was really highly educated. He was trying to executive produce a script of mine back in the 90s, which we eventually sold to New Line to do it in a different way. But he was always a great supporter, and I loved doing Nightmare Cafe. It's too bad that series didn't go further because we only had one season. It was really terrific. His son Jonathan had created it with Wes, and he was. You know, it's funny when you meet guys like Wes and George, and you see these movies, and you think, God, what kinds of men must these guys be? You know, and usually they're the brightest, the quietest, the gentlest guys.
Yes,
And they come up with these like terrible movies. But no, I loved Wes. He was a great guy, and one of my dear friends, Nick Mastandrea, who's a great assistant director, worked with Wes a number of years, loved him, and we all kind of knew each other out in LA and that whole circuit. Great talent, really gone too soon.
For sure. Right, Ben.
Oh, and as far as working with
yeah.
Robert Englund, I didn't work a lot with Robert. He was there. We did his scenes. Terrific guy, total pro. And Peter Robinson was wonderful to work with. Having a musical background myself, it was fun to talk to him about what he was doing with the show. I didn't work with him sort of hand in glove as much as I would have, say, on my own stuff or whatever. But terrific composer.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Just two more, I think. Ben, take it away.
This is from Mike Freeman at Mike Freeman 77. How would you rank your acting in Night Riders 1981? And what was your approach to the horror anthology Tales of the Dark Side, especially balancing the dark humor with the scares?
Well, I'll answer the second part of that first because the first part of it is easy to answer. I'm not much of an actor. All right, so moving on. The balancing of scares and humor is something that I learned a lot from George about. And it's a matter of, and it's something that I'm not naturally attuned to. My stuff is always much darker and consistently dark. But I think comic relief is a really great way to. It's like a piece of music, you know. If everything is at volume 10, you eventually become rather deadened to it. You need relief a little bit. You need a slower passage. You need a quieter passage in order to make the climaxes more impactful. And I think that's what humor does in great horror. It allows you to kind of laugh at yourself and your fear. Because otherwise, if you're just like constantly, you go nuts. You just like the fear will consume you. So you need that bit of relief. And it's a tough thing to do because it can devolve into camp, or it can basically undercut the rest of the fear if you let the humor become too silly, or it isn't earned. It doesn't come from a natural place. It's just a goof that you threw in there just to make people laugh for a moment. It has to be earned. It has to be organic. But if it is and it works, it's a great way to quiet things down or to let the air out of the balloon a little bit before you put the pin in for later.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. If it's done well and it works, then it's awesome. But if it feels forced, then the audience
exactly.
The audience gets it, and it just doesn't work. So we have one more question. This is actually from my mother because I know she is a huge Dune fan.
Great.
The novels. So she says, what was the biggest challenge adapting the books to the screen, the Dune books or the Dune miniseries?
Oh boy. Well, I was very lucky because I had 3 movies to do that book. And I am so thrilled that Denis Villeneuve in the new movies is doing it in more than one movie. He's not trying to cram it all into one movie. So that was the first part that was to my benefit. A lot of Frank Herbert's book is very internal monologue. There's a lot of stuff that's being discussed and thought about in a character's mind. So to externalize that was something that I really struggled with. Paul is constantly thinking about where his place is in the universe and what's happening to him. And you can't really do that in a movie, because that you just stop the movie and you're just staring at the character and you're hearing his voiceover. The drama stops, the kinetic action of the story stops. So I had to externalize that, and that was a big struggle for me. The other part of it was basically to condense the story into a straight line narrative. In the novel, you could go all over the place, jumping back and forth in time, and going off into side discussions and side dramas. Whereas I had to keep it focused on what was going on with Paul and his family, and the ultimate emergence of him as the Kwisatz Haderach and taking over the empire. So I had to adapt scenes to that narrative.
Okay.
I tried to be completely consistent with the book. I did not want to veer from the book. I did not want to reinvent Dune. So I'm hoping that everything that is in my Dune miniseries, both of them, are supported by the book. I was not interested in reinventing the story.
Fair enough. Good answer. Thank you for that. Well, that's all the viewer questions. I have sort of a fun question that I want to ask. With the holidays coming up, are there any Christmas horror movies that you watch every year?
Christmas horror movies? No.
No. Black Christmas, Gremlins. I don't know what comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, no, I can't think of anyone that really jumps out. I mean, Bad Santa is a good horror movie, even though it's like not really a horror movie.
Yes, yes.
But it's funny. And I love Bob Clark's A Christmas Story. What can I say?
Yes, that's
but
good. And he also did Black Christmas.
And he did do Black Christmas. So yeah, which is pretty damn good too. So yeah, I'd say those kinds of movies are what I gravitate towards at Christmas.
Awesome.
Christmas slasher stories. I'm not a big slasher movie fan anyway, so
I see. Okay,
that's not really my cup of tea. So I'll just go for the
classics.
The classics. Dickens wrote a great Christmas horror story.
He sure did, and I think it's been adapted a few times.
Yes, it has, and but just as the original story, it's pretty damn frightening.
It is, for sure. Ben, do you have any final questions?
I don't know. A lot of them were answered in the viewer questions.
Viewers really nailed it. Some great questions.
They were great questions. Yeah.
Big thank you for doing this. Awesome.
Yeah, this has been great.
It's been a lot of fun. It's once you get me started, I just blah blah blah. I can go on forever. So I hope some of it was coherent, and I hope your fans enjoy it. I've been enjoying watching Day of the Dead in the background there on the screen.
Is that a nice touch? Right.
What memories living in that cave, man.
Was there a lot of filming in the cave? Was that a lot?
It was brutal. It was always the same temperature, about 50 degrees and damp. And when we started that movie, it was in the winter, and we went into the caves, and we'd go in like at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was pitch dark. We'd shoot all day. When we came out, it was pitch dark. I didn't see daylight for about 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
Worth it.
It was worth it, though. I was just going to say the exact same thing. Yeah. Worth it.
Yeah, well, it got the mood across, I'll tell you.
Pretty cool artwork terrific on that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for chatting with us. This has been amazing. Check out John's book, Passing Through Veils. You can get it at wordfirepress.com, and also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, you said?
Yes.
Definitely check it out. It's worth a read. And others, yes.
Thank you.
Definitely. Go for
it. I've enjoyed it, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And one last thing, Ben, before you close it out, go over to tabbycrafts.com and get one of our tumblers. You can see our mugs on a mug right here. Sort of looks like us. Pretty cool design they did for us. So tabbycrafts.com. And Ben, do you want to do the closing?
Yeah, go to Instagram, follow us over there, likes and all that, and like and subscribe on there. Helps our channel. And thank you to everyone who comments, watches, and subscribes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, John. Bye, everyone.
Big thank you.